Welcome back to the Path to Happiness, an introduction to the unification principle. I'm your host, Dr. Tyler Hendricks. In our last session, we shared that coming on the clouds signifies that the Lord will come as a central figure surrounded by crowds of faithful, God-centered believers. This is a momentous statement. Back when I was a teenager, there was a poster of Jesus walking into a Sunday service, and all the people avoiding him, looking away, feeling uncomfortable. It raises a serious question. If you lived in Jerusalem when Jesus was on earth, would you have recognized him? Would you have given up everything to follow him? If Christ returns in the flesh, where do you think he would appear? Would it be among the Jewish people? Some Bible verses seem to say so. In John 7:4, it is recorded, and I heard, or this is Revelation 7:4, and I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000 sealed out of every tribe of the sons of Israel. Sounds like he's coming back to Israel. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." Another passage, "Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Now, many believers think this means that Christ will appear in the first Israel. However, to interpret these verses in this way is to misunderstand God's providence as Jesus taught it. He told us that the messianic role will depart from Israel, from the first Israel. In Matthew 21, there's a story that Jesus told, a parable of a householder, and tenants, and the householder's son, and his servants. Please read that Bible passage that appears on the screen. Could you not earnestly feel Jesus' heart? In this parable, the householder represents God. The vineyard represents God's work on the earth. The tenants entrusted with the work represent the first Israel. The servants represent the prophets. And the son of the householder represents Jesus. And the other tenants who harvest the fruits represent the successor of the first Israel, which accepts Jesus and expects Christ at the second advent. Jesus conveyed that he will not come again to the people who persecuted him. God will take away the mission previously entrusted to them and give it to another people who can produce its fruits upon Christ's return. Although Israel was the chosen nation, because they turned against Jesus, they lost their qualification as God's chosen people. Whenever the chosen people failed in the Bible to believe in God and turned against him, without hesitation, God would sweep them away. The 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, who transgressed against God, perished, conquered by the Assyrian Empire. Only the southern kingdom of Judah remained as the chosen people, who could eventually receive Jesus. Nevertheless, when they led Jesus to the cross, they also lost the qualification to receive the Messiah. If so, who became the new Israel after Jesus' crucifixion? It was none other than the Christians, who inherited the faith of Abraham and took on the mission of Abraham's descendants. St. Paul wrote, "Through their trespass, the Jewish people's trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous." Therefore, the chosen people who should lay the foundation for Christ at the second advent are not the lineal descendants of Abraham, but rather the Christians who inherited the faith of Abraham. Well, there are many Christian nations. Which of them will inherit this unfinished work of God and bear its fruits? In the Bible, it teaches that the country that will inherit the unfinished work of God and bear the fruits is a nation that lies in the East. In the book of Revelation, chapter 5, 1-7, it says, "Then I saw another angel ascend from the rising of the sun, with the seal of the living God. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000. Christ will return from a country in the East." Since ancient times, the nations in the East have traditionally been considered to be the three nations of Korea, Japan, and China. Among them, Japan, throughout its history, has worshipped the sun goddess. Japan entered the period of the Second Advent as a fascist nation, and from 1910 severely persecuted Korea and invaded China. After a period of Christian presence in Japan, Japan suppressed Christianity brutally, which remains a very small part of its religious composition. China, at the time of the Second Advent, was moving to communism and has suppressed new religions. Neither are hospitable to Christ's flourishing. Is Korea, then, the nation in the East where Christ will return? Let us examine the historical conditions needed in order for Korea to become a nation fit to receive the Messiah. First, Korea had to fulfill a national dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan. Entering the era of the Second Advent of the Messiah, Korea suffered untold hardships as a colony of Japan for a 40-year period. The first Israel suffered 400 years in Egypt, and the second Israel, Christianity, had to prevail over the 400 years of persecution in Rome. Korea also had to suffer for a 40-year period from 1905 to 1945 as a colony of Japan, in order to fulfill a dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan. The Korean people suffered imperialism, economic exploitation, social anxiety, cultural and ideological oppression at the hands of Japan. In reaction, Korean Christians led an independence movement, yearning for God's kingdom, an ideal world. Second, Korea is the front line for both God and Satan. When we reach the end of history, inevitably, there will be a final battle between God's side and Satan's side, and God's side must bring victory. At the point of confrontation between God and Satan, a sacrifice must be offered as the condition to determine the outcome. The Korean people were this sacrifice. God intervened to save South Korea, and Satan aggressively captured and controls North Korea. For the sake of the restoration of the universe, Korea, as the national offering, was divided, just as Abraham's sacrifices were to be divided. The division is at the 38th parallel, the line dividing Cain and Abel. It is the front line in the battle between democracy and communism. If the second coming of the Messiah comes to Korea, God will work through him for a settlement between North Korea, Cain's view of life, and South Korea, Abel's view of life. Centered on Christianity, we then can resolve the left-right crisis. This is the foundation to bring God's kingdom of heaven to the earth. Third, Korea has to be the object partner of God's heart. In order to cultivate the history of the providence of restoration and be the object partner of God's deep, sorrowful, agonizing heart, this nation's many afflictions and pain must be honored within its troubled history. For this reason, Korea's history is one of blood and sweat and tears, working hard to protect its national identity, language, and territory, and to cherish its history of over 5,000 years. Furthermore, Korea is a good-hearted nation that has not once invaded another country. The Korean people are by nature endowed with a religious character. Korea is a strong nation that has evinced a strong desire to worship God and has always revered the virtues of loyalty, filial piety, and chastity. Fourth, the Korean people must have clear testimonies by prophets. The Korean people have believed in the prophecy that the righteous king will appear and establish a glorious and everlasting kingdom in their land. This messianic idea among the Korean people was revealed through the Maitreya Buddha in Buddhism and Changamnok, a book of prophecy. Furthermore, among the faithful of every religion in Korea are those who have received revelations that the founders of their religion will return to Korea. Korean Christians have received revelations and signs testifying to the second coming of Christ in Korea. They are sprouting in profusion like bamboo shoots after a rain. We invite you to join us. Thank you for your kind attention, and may God guide your consideration of all these things.